Jiro here for Umbra Games with a review of Dark Souls 3, played on PlayStation 4 for the review, but also available on Xbox One and PC. The darkness, mystery, and brutal gameplay returns in this third and allegedly final installment of the Dark Souls series. As always, the bulk of the story told in Dark Souls games is a bit obscure and hidden, and requires a lot of community involvement to put the pieces together. What I did draw from the game, though, is that you play as an undead creature known as an Unkindled, and you must rise up and seek out the 4 Cinder Lords who refuse to sacrifice themselves to keep the one flame burning, i.e. stop the world from sinking into complete darkness. The 5th Lord is cool with the sacrifice, though. In fact, he cut off his own leg so he wouldn't change his mind, and even helps you out a bit along the way. Dark Souls is an open-world action RPG, where in order to access each new area, you must first take down a boss. Each area has a number of bonfires, which serve as save points and fast travel nodes, allowing you to return to any one you've previously lit. In the usual fashion, you can start the game as one of the preset classes with some starting stat points already put in, or you can create your own. You also get to choose a starting gift. Per usual, as you progress through the game and kill the grotesque miscreants of the Kingdom of Lothric, you receive souls, which, assuming you can hold on to them, are used to purchase more stat points, leveling up. The points you put into your character have very different effects, not just in the damage you give and take, but also determining the gear you can wield, exactly like previous entries. Swinging heavy swords requires strength, daggers require dexterity, and certain magic weapons require either faith or intelligence. One major change to the Souls character building formula this time is the presence of the blue focus point bar, FP per short, increased by attunement. This serves as a usage meter for spells. In previous entries, you could use a spell X number of times before requiring rest at a bonfire to restore its uses. Now each spell takes a set number of FP, and the bar gets refilled via bonfire visit. This brings about the addition of the Ashen Estus Flask. The regular orange Estus Flask is still present, which refills HP, but the blue Ashen one restores FP. Every time you visit a bonfire, your Estus Flasks are recharged, and you can visit the blacksmith in the main world hub called Firelink Shrine to adjust your allotment between health and magic flasks at any time, free of charge. Even melee users can consume FP through the use of new weapon skills found on every weapon and shield. Activated with a click of a button, these skills can be used at will. For those not familiar, every action you take in a Souls game depletes the 3rd green bar, which you can see at the top, called your stamina bar. The majority of the strategy in battle in this series relies on keeping an eye on that bar, as blocking with a shield drains the bar fast too, leaving you open to enemy attacks. Dark Souls 3 continues the emphasis on watching enemy attack patterns and movement, and teaching you to look for openings. I always roll a sorcerer in these games, which brings about its own sets of challenges. I exchange my ability to cast with the lack of strong armor or the ability to take too many hits. Upon death, you leave your bloodstain with all the souls you've collected. You restart from the last bonfire you touched, and if you can make it back to your body, you can reclaim the souls you've lost. Die on the way there, they're gone forever. Now, previous Soul games and Bloodborne did a great job with placing that bloodstain in the exact place you died. If you jumped off a ledge, it would put the stain at the last point of solid ground. There were so many times in Dark Souls 3, one of them in particular that was crucial, where my bloodstain was nowhere to be found in the vicinity of my death. Sometimes it was just moved a few feet one way or the other, but a couple of times I couldn't see it, and I got slaughtered losing my bounty. Instead of steadily losing maximum HP like Dark Souls 2, you're either embered or not, with no increasing penalty for cumulative deaths. In addition to buying stat points, there are several vendors this time around, with more available as you find them in the dark corners of the world. Some of them, by performing tasks or simply talking to them, will transport them to the Firelink Shrine, where they offer their goods. The blacksmith I mentioned is also on hand to reinforce or infuse weapons. Reinforcing uses specific materials you find in chests or drops from certain enemies to increase the base stats of a weapon. Infusing a weapon takes a gem of whatever type you'd like, including elemental properties like fire and lightning, or gems that change a weapon's scaling power in coordination with your stats. For example, since I have a high intelligence stat as a sorcerer, it was beneficial to me to infuse my weapon with crystal, which added a portion of my int to the weapon's damage. The blacksmith starts with a few base infusions, but the majority require you to locate a specific coal in the wilds, most hidden in secret places. One final unique shop is the 5th Cinder Lord, where he can exchange souls of bosses for unique weapons and spells. I personally found my options a little limited as I continued to raise my short sword through reinforcement and infusion. I didn't really ever find a melee weapon that had any advantage over that starting one. One further disadvantage to that crystal short sword, though, is a majority of its damage is of the magic element. There were a couple bosses resistant to magic, meaning both my spells and melee were reduced. Dark Souls 3 brought some variations to their usual boss formula, as a couple had specific mechanics in which you had to focus. The one boss encounter that sticks out in my mind is the Deacons of the Deep. A horde of regenerating undead priests take turns being possessed by a glowing red light. The only way to damage the boss is to hit the possessed one. At half-life, the High Deacon appears with some dark-robed monks that heal him, requiring you to manage the herd to hit the closest henchman before being able to take him out. In fact, most bosses have two phases in this game. At that second phase point, a lot will just enrage and move faster, but some also take on a host of new moves. The only real irritation was when these phases were split up by cutscenes. It is usually difficult for me to tell when I'm engaging a required or optional boss in this game, as very few times when you're heading to an area does someone mention what lives there and what's on the other side of the zone. I try my best not to look at a walkthrough or a map while playing these games because of the directionless wandering with no quest markers, and the open world nature of these games. It takes me back to the times of old where exploration was key, as well as remembering how to get where by terrain as opposed to always watching a minimap. A lot of corners and turns you begin to remember either by the scenery or the enemy that ambushed you there. The game is full of secrets, and even secrets within secrets. If I recall correctly, there are about 7 optional bosses and 12 regular bosses spread across the game's 17 areas. I ended up finding them all. For those keeping track, that is a few less areas than the previous entries, but they feel bigger in scale and overall area. The architecture and texture of these zones, as well as the ability to see other areas in a somewhat foggy but long draw distance, makes up for the smaller quantity. Dark Souls 3 does have limited cooperative campaign play, structured like Bloodborne's. While you're in an embered state, you can find summon marks on the ground to pull in other players and occasionally NPCs to help you tackle areas, or more specifically boss fights. To me, summoning the help in boss fights felt a bit like cheating, but I did try it out on one I was having particular problems with due to my inability to hit a weakness. You do receive fewer souls as a reward for your victory, as some are given to your teammates, but if you're intimidated by Dark Souls' trademark difficulty, this could lower your barrier to entry. Not only do you help out other players by helping them defeat bosses, but you can also increase your soul count to help you level up further. There are subsequent New Game Plus modes allowing you to start the game again with your levels and equipment, facing an ever-increasing difficulty level. It appears too that there are multiple endings, which I got hints from some of the characters I interacted with, but the key points to trigger these endings are fairly obscure, and it's hard to foresee the consequences of some of the actions. One point of contention with being a ranged attacker is the necessity of locking onto enemies to hit them. A click on the right stick will lock on, but the distance from your enemy is fairly picky. If no enemy is in sight, it adjusts the camera to face whatever way your character is, causing some huge problems with those quick bosses. There's also a bit of a collision issue now and again, which feels a bit unbalanced. As you swinging a sword in a narrow hallway will cause your weapon to stop its swing, enemies don't have those same restrictions, with the capability of hitting you on the other side of solid objects. It does pretty consistently occur though, so it's just another thing to prepare for. I usually say that the Souls games aren't really hard, you just have to play it differently than you do other games. You're not a space marine with a regenerating shield, you're a fragile undead-looking biped taking on creatures and evils much greater than you are. It just means shield up when you walk into a room and patience in your exchange with foes. That said, this game does have a few very difficult points, mainly in a few of the boss fights, but also in the levels themselves. So if you're looking for a game that can challenge you and you enjoy the exploration without quest markers, having free reign over character progression, a variety of equipment to find and upgrade, looking for secrets and clues across darkly beautiful detailed landscapes with all varieties of creatures and bosses awaiting you around every corner, you can handle the frustrations of some camera difficulties, moving blood stains, and collision unfairness, Dark Souls 3 is there for you. Rated as an action RPG, Dark Souls 3 hits an 83 out of 100 on a true 1 to 100 scale, with 50 being an average game. This is Giro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Ultra hard or super easy, subscribe for more video notifications, or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.